Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is the first of our Humanising Work live series with Bailey and French. Every day we're having conversations at midday GMT for every weekday for the next 15 days. And we're starting today by talking about such a popular topic, human leadership. And I am really excited and pleased to have Grace joining me here for today's conversation. I'll let her introduce herself in just a second. I've worked with Grace for many years. We've had some fantastic conversations. So I'm actually just really looking forward to having a really good chat with you, Grace. Just for all those people who are watching the recording, we are putting this out live currently on Facebook, on YouTube, and on our LinkedIn live channels, as well as repurposing this for our new podcast, which is available on Spotify. So welcome, Grace. It's lovely to see you. How are you doing today?
Very good. A nice, bright, sunny day, so no complaints.
And do you want to just give a brief intro to the people who don't know you already? I think we've got some friends on, but I think it would be lovely to hear a little bit more about what you've been up to.
Yes. Hi, I'm Grace Walsh, business psychologist. So that's my background. Work across public, private sector, all levels. Work a lot with senior leaders. I suppose a passion of mine, an interest is around emotional intelligence and the application specifically of that with senior leaders. So great to be here. So really interesting, relevant topic for me.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining me. And so really, yes, human leadership. I'm really glad we're going to come on to talk in more detail about emotional intelligence specifically, which is obviously one of the reasons I wanted you to have a chat with me here today. But let's just start off with what is human leadership? You know, it's a new topic really in the whole span of theories and models on leadership that certainly you and I have been working on throughout our careers. Human leadership seems to be more topical now than ever before. But I guess really I want to open up with that question. What is human leadership? What does it mean? So what are your thoughts, Grace? What does human leadership mean to you?
Yeah. It is kind of what it says on the tin, isn't it? But it's very much, for me, it's around that authenticity piece, that human connection, how it is that we build, nurture trust, kindness, as human leaders, seeing not just beyond our kind of teams and organization, but to the wider society, resilience, flexibility, all of those aspects really kind of feed into what is human leadership, and as an approach for me.
And that's really interesting, isn't it? Because that's a huge amount of stuff. So, you know, that's a long list. And it's like, you know, there's so many leadership models and theories out there that, you know, you can kind of pick and choose, can't you, from your toolkit of what people are saying in terms of what they're relating to. I think what I'm hearing, what I'm sensing is that there is something different about human leadership. There is something that is a feeling. It is a sense. It is an emotion. It's part of that social fabric almost of what we've been able to create through a very strange and turbulent time, and through lots of new barriers. We've almost found this ability to tap into like that subconscious ability that many people have in developing relationships to come across as the human that we are. And I think we sometimes so much we forget that, almost that, you know, we do have incredible abilities as a human being that don't necessarily need to be trained. They are things that actually come throughout our lives, through our challenges and through the experiences that create who we are, create our character, our personality, our values, our beliefs, all come from different experiences that we've had, how we've learned to navigate this world. But when I talk to people and say, you know, when you think of human leadership, can you think of anyone who is a human leader? What are the type of examples people come up with? It is all those things that you talk about, and it's those little snippets. And so one of the things that that occurred to us when we were talking more about human leadership as a broad topic was really thinking, okay, so what's the basis, what's a good framework we can use to really think more deeply about giving some structure around human leadership? And emotional intelligence is a theory that's been around for some time, as you know. It's a model that I learned way back when I was at university studying, and it's still relevant. It's still being used right away across the world in lots of organizations.
Yeah.
So why do you think emotional intelligence is so relevant now? What would you say from your experience?
Yeah. And absolutely, it's so relevant. And I think just making that connection between being a human leader with a EI, it's about having that self-awareness, that personal leadership. And that very much is about by kind of us being our own life coach, living by our own kind of personal mission. And also as well, by doing that, how it is that we enable not just the best in ourselves, but also how we enable the best in others. And as we know, kind of emotional intelligence, it's critical for kind of leading effectively, building relationships, building teams, being resilient, but also as well, you know, how it is that we go and problem solve as well and make decisions. I think it's kind of now more relevant even than what it was before in the past. If we think about the kind of emotional intelligent frameworks, and Daniel Goleman, obviously being one of the founding fathers of emotional intelligence, and kind of his framework to kind of think about it, the self-awareness, the other awareness, and what that means and how it is that we manage ourselves and also build relationships. I think from a self-awareness perspective as a leader, we're all experiencing, or many of us experiencing quite challenging times. And we first really need to think about ourselves, really look after ourselves. You know, what are we experiencing? What are the emotions we're experiencing? And it's an analogy that I know is quite cliche now, but it's about putting the oxygen mask on ourselves before we help others, but really tuning into how we're feeling, what's relevant for us now in light of the current climate, and building our own psychological capital and resources so that we can be resilient. And it's also about that vulnerability. I think, Alex, you touched on that. That's really key and fundamental for me. It's actually being able to say, I'm okay, but also recognizing when I'm not okay and being vulnerable, which we know is fundamental when we talk about Jane Dutton's work and how it is that we build trust. So that's been one of the kind of key ingredients. And I think it's interesting. So from my coaching that I'm doing, you know, I've been very grateful of working and connecting in with leaders throughout the pandemic. And I think that leaders are definitely seeing that more, recognizing actually our definition of being a strong leader is by talking about our emotions, how we're feeling, being vulnerable with each other. The other awareness piece is really that ability to pick up on the emotional clues from people, the unsaid things, which actually we know in this virtual environment can be more challenging. We're not seeing the kind of energy, the dynamics that we would see face to face in the office. So actually it's an additional skill as leaders we need to kind of nurture more. So by reading people, we can then kind of communicate, land messages more effectively. It's that aspect of empathy really coming through, very much recognizing the not just professional challenges that we're facing, but the personal challenges. And then the kind of the self-management aspect, and Kelly McGonigal always comes to mind for me, the upsides of stress. It's not just about our perception of stress. It's not actually, sorry, the stress is the enemy, it's our perception of it, and how it is that we can kind of, you know, through mindset, be more resilient, that kind of optimistic mindset, growth mindset as well, that we know Carol Dweck always touches on. And then that relationship management piece being fundamental. And it's interesting, I think that with the pandemic, that work mask has been somewhat removed.
Yeah.
And what we're hearing are those actually relationships are stronger. And actually, those relationships, we can see people for who they are, which absolutely is that authenticity piece around human leadership.
And I love just listening to you talking about all the different research that sits behind all of that, because what stands out to me in what you're saying is that actually emotional intelligence as a framework just really helps guide us in the current situation where we are trying to support leaders, trying to support teams and organizations to find their way through a very challenging environment with lots of new barriers that people weren't anticipating. And it has really broad applicability, doesn't it? Because you know, it's about, yeah, exactly that, making sure that you're feeling authentic. So that awareness of knowing, you know, what matters to you, what is most important to you, who are you, and how can you be and be happy in this world and navigate it well, as well as tapping into exactly that, you know, being able to listen, as you said before, listening with empathy and compassion to other people's experience, when we know lots of people have been in their own little bubbles through all the different lockdowns and the situations over the last year. People are living in a very different personal reality, and then still interacting and interchanging with others. And almost it's very easy to make the assumption that other people are in your same situation, but actually taking the time to be curious and ask them, actually, no, sorry, just let's take step back a bit. You know, how did that work for you? Was that the same experience? Because this is how it played out for me, and you know, it was great or it wasn't great. So being able to do that and role modeling it as a way, and role modeling resilience, exactly as you said, sharing vulnerabilities and how you've achieved, how you've kind of conquered those challenges, and sharing that with people to role model how resilient we are as leaders. It's all what knits together the fabric of that lovely kind of relationship management piece. Because without all of those steps, you can't kind of jump straight to relationship management without being able to actually, you know, lay those foundations. And so it feels like to me, you know, the emotional intelligence steps, whilst quite you know, basic in terms of, if you just think about self and other awareness, self-management, relationship management, it's kind of four main kind of foundational steps. Actually, that's a really helpful model for leaders now. It's not too complex. It's not too jargony. So I guess in terms of your experience with EI, you know, as I said, it is an old model. Why do you think it stood the test of time? Why do you think, you know, it stood out as one of those things that we actually continually use in all organizations? Because it sits there behind so many different leadership development programs that we've heard of and work of, leadership values, leadership capability frameworks. You'll see EI all over the place, and people are talking about it a lot as well still now. So why would you say, from your experience, why has it stood the test of time compared to some other models?
Absolutely. And it's going back to my early career, so which is nearly 20 years now. But yeah, I think I would have started off myself looking at working with leaders and looking at kind of personality and personality assessment and IQ. And what I could really start to see was a key differentiator. And again, research very much supports this. It's not about kind of IQ capability. It's very much about that emotional intelligence, which is a key differentiator for leadership success. And it shows it over and over again. And so I think that's very much why it's still relevant now. All of the other aspects, you know, you can work on, you can nurture, but having that emotional intelligence really is that key differentiator. The also, for me, it's that link, and again, research very much showing the link with well-being. Well-being at the top of the agenda, as we know, very much working in that space for many years and ongoing and more relevant even now, because we can recognize, yes, the current challenges that we've experienced, but actually very much what I'm also hearing from leaders and organizations more broadly is recognizing, actually, when we do start to transition back to kind of a hybrid model and some people working from home, actually there's going to be new challenges around well-being. So it's absolutely relevant. And kind of, again, from just the kind of definition of emotional intelligence, about understanding our emotions, really tuning into who we are, being comfortable with who we are, that authenticity piece we keep talking about, the awareness of others, and how it is that we build and nurture relationships, which we know is foundational to being resilient and psychological, emotional well-being as well. And we talk about the PERMA model and Martin Seligman, P for positive emotions. So that's very much tuning into our emotions, but also as well how it is that we can focus more on those positive aspects going on in our life, and the impact that not only has on our feelings, but also as well our decision making and being creative. Engagement is around that authenticity piece and our strengths, just, as I said, really tuning into who we are and what we're passionate about and what drives us, or the relationships, the meaning and purpose, and then the A around achievement. So very much connected to the well-being aspect, but also as well that emotional intelligence, it's not a tick box. This isn't something that once we've done our course in, it's something that then we have achieved and it's done and dusted. It's an ongoing, continuous thing. And again, it grows incrementally throughout our life. And again, research shows this. And as a leader, the real fundamentals of that is the fact that we need to continue to learn and grow as leaders, as human beings, and recognizing that it's an ongoing, continuous evolution. And I think that's some of the reasons why it's still relevant.
Yeah, it is. And I love the fact that you talked about that. It's not a tick box. It's something that you can continually work on. It's about our lifelong learning, which is obviously a massive topic in lots of different research articles at the moment. EI has got tons of research to show the incremental advances over time with age. We know that, certain challenges in our lives and on certain life stages increase our emotional intelligence. And then that leads me to think, well, what would how could we help leaders in leadership development programs really accelerate that learning, and without kind of creating any kind of critical challenges, but what can we do to support people to just focus in on it and bring it to the forefront of their attention, so that the conditions are there for them to learn through those stages quicker than if they had to find them themselves. And I think for me that's kind of like what we can do almost on a practical level to bring that to life for people, is just almost bring it to the forefront of attention, being explicit, using communication, labeling it when you see it, reflective learning. I've talked so much recently about the kind of lost art of reflective learning. I think we need to be doing much more of that. I think we're always so focused on what's next all the time. It's really nice to be able to look back and go, actually, that experience massively increased my ability to be more aware of other people through developing empathy skills, curiosity, listening. So that's all kind of top of mind at the moment. I'm sitting here thinking all these different questions. And then I had a thought about, what does that mean in terms of new leaders and our future leaders? So when we perhaps got leaders who are definitely capable to take on leadership responsibility at maybe a fairly young age, how can we help them with their emotional intelligence when we know that from all the research, that's likely to still be developing considerably? And I think there was a question here that came up. Let me have a look. How can we build self-awareness in others on a real practical level? And that's such a good question. Something that we've been asked previously from many clients, partners, is like, yes, I've got a group of leaders. I would love to enhance their self-awareness. And we've just talked about, authenticity and purpose. I love the fact that you brought the PERMA model in there as well, because yes, self-awareness as itself, there's lots of ways we can develop self-awareness, but what's the best way we can do it now in the current climate? What's the thing that's going to be most relevant, most impactful to help build more self-awareness? We're going to be talking about it in depth tomorrow with Lindsay. So whoever asked the question, I hope you'll come along and join us tomorrow. But what are any top tips from you, Grace? You've done so much work in this field. What would you say if you had a population of leaders and it was like, how do we develop their self-awareness in the best way possible now for this environment?
Yeah, and it's a really good question. If there was one thing I would say, it's look for feedback.
Yeah.
And feedback from a range of different, perspectives. We talk about this feedback culture from an organizational perspective, looking for feedback in all different directions. But it's also the application of that growth mindset in doing that. And we don't always like the feedback. And we can always recognize, even in ourselves. I have a recent example of myself getting feedback and going into that fixed mindset and focusing only on the bad things they said. But actually, absolutely learning from that. I think that is one of the kind of top ingredient in building self-awareness, but also having the right mindset so that we're taking that in and processing it in the right way.
Yeah, no, I think it's so relevant, and I'm laughing because I'm in fierce agreement with you. I regularly get opportunities, and yes, I have to be in the right mindset to focus on making those positive, definitely. But yeah, looking for feedback, it's interesting, isn't it? Because that's one part of like the reflective learning that I often ask leaders is actually when people say, if I say to them, how would you rate yourself at the moment, in terms of your emotional intelligence? How would you rate yourself in terms of how aware you are? And they say they're quite high, and I'm like, oh, that's really fantastic. How do you know? And it's that question, how do you know? So I wonder whether there's an opportunity to the person who just sent this message in to us. I wonder if there's an opportunity to actually do some clever questioning, curiosity questioning around, what is going on, what is possible, and what's the evidence, what's the feedback, what's the buzz, what's the conversation that's going on, how do they know? And that not often quite opens up the conversation about being able to say, oh, well, actually, perhaps I should go and investigate more. In fact, I've got an opportunity coming up. I've got a team meeting. I've got a one-to-one. Actually, I'm probably just going to ask. And it's like so many times I think we rely on having other types of tools and diagnostics to tell us what's going on. And in so many circumstances, I think there's probably an example of human leadership. It's quite okay if you have a good relationship and you're able to be vulnerable to people to say, actually, something doesn't feel right to me. Am I missing something? I would really appreciate anything that can help support me learning as a leader. And I think that can really be quite powerful when people go and ask those questions, because even in asking it, as you know, they're demonstrating they want to know, they care, they're listening.
Yeah, and that positive platform that we create as leaders, so that people feel comfortable to be able to do that, and that psychological safety. So we have to create the right platforms, and as you say, create those platforms rather than the expectation, well, if somebody wants to say something, they'll come to me, and that's not always the case. So it's those platforms as well we create.
And we've had some points coming through. Anna in the team has just mentioned something as well. Good tip, asking for feedback, growth mindset. Hand in hand, strengths-based feedback obviously helps make it feel a lot more positive, and a lot more about I'm in this together. I'm putting myself into a situation to share feedback with you, and it's not negative. Actually, it's about what we can do to grow and make this whole situation better, and that feels a lot more comfortable. Curious, Anna said, can we create psychological safety in a virtual and hybrid world? I think, everyone's talking about this at the moment. The hybrid working piece is really, really hard. I don't know if anyone's tried actually delivering, to a hybrid audience. It's really tricky to get it right. And, you have to be able to keep the pace going so that people aren't getting bored online. And at the same time, being able to listen in to all the side conversations going on for the people who are there in person. And how do people then feel about what's going on? And it's what the snippets of the conversations people are missing that leads to that sense of, do I feel like I belong here? Am I able to say what I think? Or, is it not necessarily, welcomed at the moment? Do you have any more thoughts on that, Grace, in terms of creating that safe environment?
Yeah, and that psychological safety, it's something that comes up a lot because we are working virtually. And I think the reality, we will be going through and into this more hybrid model way of working, and how it is that we maintain that. And I think that one of the kind of key learnings and recognitions of what works really well is creating different ways for people to communicate. So some people feel confident to be able to speak like we are, others less so. So using the systems that now we're so familiar with Teams, Zooms, these types of platforms, which are fantastic. So people can talk, but they can also put things in the chat. We can use polls so that people feel that they're contributing, feel empowered around that. And the more that we create that, the more confidence, obviously, people will have. I think it's interesting as well, because when we talk about psychological safety, it's around very much trust and how it is that we build trust. So again, Jane Dutton stuff, who we love, and the kind of fundamentals in that is around self-disclosure, sharing valuable information, that vulnerability piece again. So that is how we build psychological safety, and also the fact that when people do voice opinions, that there won't be those negative consequences to that. And actually, it feeds directly back into what we've just been speaking about, that kind of feedback culture, where people feel they can speak their mind and they look and seek feedback from each other. So they're all kind of key pieces that feed into being and feeling safe to speak our mind.
And yeah, use questions that are bubbling up inside, but we're just a bit nervous to ask. But having that bravery to try it, because in many cases, and I think certainly Paul was mentioning, obviously people coming back to their workplaces, that's going to be happening more and more over the next couple of months. People are, what's happened? What are the conversations that I've missed? Who have I, what have I not been able to observe that I would do in a normal office environment? And how do I kind of, and actually it's really interesting. If I take the analogy of my kids going back to school, it was really interesting to see them kind of looking to reestablish their identity and then almost reestablish their kind of level with their peers in terms of their relationships. And children are quite obvious. They're quite explicit. They say exactly what they're feeling in a lot of circumstances. And it was really interesting because I was thinking, actually, that must be going on a lot in offices as well. It's like, how do I kind of like readjust myself? What's happened in the time, in the last year? Who's flourished? Who's really struggled? How do we kind of establish where we fit in almost, and ensure that people still feel that, that they belong and that that's okay, and change and evolution is good for us. People often struggle. They feel held back by their existing relationships, that they can't kind of reinvent and become like a new version. But actually, we can really supportively do that, particularly with the strengths-based feedback and strengths mastery. I've found that's something that really helps people feel comfortable to evolve, and grow. So we're coming up for our last 3 minutes. If anyone's got any additional questions, get them in quickly. It's been a really great conversation, Grace. The time has flown by. I told you it'd go quickly today.
That it did.
So yeah, absolutely loved it. Thank you everyone for joining in, for sending in your comments. Thank you to all our viewers who are viewing us live, as well as those people who are viewing the recording afterwards. And also for those people who are listening in on our audio podcast, which is our new one on Humanising Work with Bailey and French, available on Spotify, as well as several other platforms. Actually went live over the weekend. So super exciting time. We're sharing our content very broad and wide. And this is the first of 15 live series conversations happening every day at midday GMT, here on LinkedIn Live, on YouTube, and on our Facebook channels. So join us tomorrow. We're going to be delving into self-awareness, which is the first stage of the emotional intelligence model I've just talked about with Grace. We're going to be talking with Lindsay Foreman tomorrow about how we can develop our own authentic and purposeful awareness of ourself, and talking further then throughout the week about how we can use the most relevant, recent, positive psychology insights and data to inform how we can develop our other awareness, as well as manage ourselves as leaders and manage our relationships well. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of the series. Grace, thank you so much for joining me. I've loved having your input and your insights. Please do anyone get in touch with us via our Bailey and French consulting page on LinkedIn or directly. Looking forward to everyone joining us for the next in the series. Thank you so much. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your Monday. Got the rest of the afternoon to go. Grace, take care, and I will speak to you soon.
Fabulous. Take care. Lovely to be here.
Thanks, Grace. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.